Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants to the Creative Flip final conference, Flipping the Future. Yesterday we have talked about how to flip the future for the cultural and creative sectors by shaping policies. We have talked about innovative policy answers for a positive transformation and resilient future-proof sector. We have touched upon ways for better access to finance and a return to a new normal after the pandemic. Today, we would like to connect these discussions. When shaping policy is a first fundamental step to overall strengthen and improve the sector's ecosystem, then taking action is the logical next step. During day 2 of our conference, we would like to invite you to participate and hear about Creatives Unite, a resource platform for the CCSIs. Learn about several successful pilot actions, such as Creative Flip Learning Labs and a peer-to-peer exchange program. And we will also talk about the importance of creative skills, transversal skills, and how they can be fostered. But we will also have a critical look and see what are current skills needs and gaps. So you need money. If you are a creative and you would answer this question with yes, then please make sure to join us for this parallel session workshop after lunch, where our colleagues from IDEA will present their guidebook. A second workshop will be dedicated to our group of ambassadors of change. These ambassadors are representatives of creative hubs from across Europe, and they have tested successfully innovative concepts of new ways of reacting to the pandemic, and they will share these innovative ways of reacting with you. And the third workshop invites you to actually play a game, a serious game, in fact. It's called Flip to Act, and this will involve various stakeholders from the sector who will have to join forces to solve a financial challenge. All 3 workshops are taking place at 2 p.m. Central European Time this afternoon, so you can still sign up if you haven't done so yet. With this, I would like to officially open day 2 of the conference, Creative Flip Final Conference, Flipping the Future, and we are extremely pleased to have you here with us. Please also feel free to use the Slido tab that you can see to intervene with your comments and questions. We will give our best to pick them up, answer in writing if necessary, or pick them up in the panel sessions if time allows. And of course, there's also, even though we're in a virtual conference, there's a networking area foreseen for you that you can use during breaks throughout all day. Now, it is time and my great pleasure to kick off the first session of the day about values of cross-sectoral cooperation. As one successful example, we will first take a look at the Creative Flip Learning Labs program, which we implemented in the beginning of this year. And to spotlight the topic from different angles, we will be hearing from Lars Ebert, who is our Learning Labs expert and the author of a set of guidelines for creative partnerships. We will hear from Ms. Riina Vuorikari from the Joint Research Center at the European Commission. She has led in-depth research about the opportunities of maker spaces for education and learning. And we would also like to switch perspective and hear about creative hubs, about creative professionals and how they experience this mutually beneficial partnership between hubs and the educational sector. Vassilis, Charalampidis, president of the European Creative Hub Network, will be sharing his first-hand experience from the sector. One of our objectives at Creative Flip Project is to enhance cooperation between the CCSIs and the educational sector on the other hand in particular. Through our so-called learning labs, we have piloted a program that does precisely that. We brought together creative hubs and institutions of formal and non-formal learning. So let's see what such a cooperation could look like. What you have seen here is the result of our learning lab implemented by RockLab, a creative hub in Slovenia, Ljubljana, who have worked together with 2 primary schools early this year. And the hub has actually organized online workshops and guided the students of very young age still to produce electronic textiles in form of a lightning bracelet. So this is just one example of our 15 labs that Creative Flip supported between January and March. And these are 15 creative hubs across Europe paired with 15 schools and universities. And each of these couples has actually set out to cooperate and introduce students of all ages to different creative activities and skills. And these were activities which they would not usually get to know in their usual curricula. And the outcome was extremely impressive and extremely varied. From food waste recycling in Spain to e-textiles, as you have seen in Slovenia. There was a whole week of design thinking in Romania and an online music making workshop in Scotland. Of course, due to the pandemic, some of these learning labs had to take place online. Not all of them were able to integrate the activities in the official curricula. However, all participants agreed on one point: creative activities like those are much still neglected in the schools and universities curricula. But because creative skills are transversal and they help the students to gain really a variety of competences, they are so important. The feedback we've got from the student was extremely positive and encouraging, and I suggest we hear what they have to say for themselves, and we'll show you a video of the students in Edinburgh, Scotland, for their learning lab.
It's been really amazing to be part of the Learning Labs project. It's been so inspiring to see all the creative work that's happening at all the different labs across Europe. For our part in it, we have run songwriting workshops at a local high school where we have written a song and recorded it as a group via the smartboard. And we've also used different apps to help with the process. One of them is called Padlet, which has helped pupils share their ideas in text form. And we've also used another app called BandLab, which has shown pupils how a recording studio works and how we edit and record audio to make a finished song. We've also run some digital music making sessions using the Launchpad app on the iPad. Using this, pupils have been shown how to use a basic sampler and record their own compositions that they can share at the end of the project. On top of this, we've given pupils the opportunity to learn an instrument at the Tinderbox online music school. So I'm going to hand over to some of the pupils from there so you can hear a bit of feedback from them.
I really like how we get to learn a new instrument and socialise with people at the same time.
I think it's just a fact of it's getting you to do something, because with the coronavirus and that, it's like there's nothing to do, so it's just putting you into a routine.
Just like the fact that you can choose what type of music you can do, and like even if you're not good at it, you can still learn it and also hang out with people once it's finished.
Helps with like confidence and meeting new people.
I like how it's kind of like you can choose what you do.
It's like this chance every week just to see people and have a nice chat.
Yes.
When you're in like the first like long bit before like you come in to do like your songs and stuff, like everyone just has a big conversation and it just makes you feel really wholesome and welcome.
Yeah, I felt like some people really let themselves out and quite enjoyed sharing my poems and stuff like that.
Amazing, just go to it. It gives you a lot of opportunities as well, so I think that's the thing that I like about it.
It's a really great place where you get to chat with people and learn a new instrument at the same time.
Fun and you can learn from it.
It's like a great experience and people that are not here, they are astronauts.
Teaches you how to play music and be yourself and inspire others.
We hope this gave you a bit of an impression what we've been up to with the Creative Flip Learning Labs lately. And as you heard, these students have already drawn their conclusions. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Lars Ebert. Lars has been working with us. Lars has been working for many years at the intersection of arts and education himself. And he has joined our team for the past months to accompany the learning labs and extract from their experiences in order to draw a set of observations and guidelines for creative partnerships. Lars, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Wanda. I'm still impressed by the videos we've seen because they remind me very much about the conversations that I was privileged to lead with all 15 of the learning labs. And I must say it was such a richness of experiences and creativity and struggle also in the pandemic to deliver something that would otherwise be delivered in a hub setting. That was really fascinating. Today's session or today's heading is Values of Cross-sectoral Cooperation, and to me it was quite obvious that there is a huge value in this cooperation that I've tried to capture in the guidelines, which is more a sort of aide-memoire of how such collaborations can work across fields, because often we speak different languages in education and in culture and in creativity. And it's a lot about building trust that is necessary to take this action, as you said in your introduction, Wanda. And I think one of the values we can speak about is that of transversal skills or generic skills, that set of competencies that is delivered in a making process. And I know Riina is speaking a little bit later, and because I've heard Riina before, and I could have a peek in her PowerPoint. I know that she's talking about incidental and intentional skills, and I think both are addressed in these corporations. And I'm just going to take you through one of the conclusions that you will find in the guidelines, which is a set of competencies that I would propose to the community as an outcome, as a conclusion of these 15 learning labs. And it's up for discussion. And as with many sets of competencies, it is a reference framework. And a reference framework means you can agree or you can disagree, but you somehow need to relate to it in one way or another. Now, the richness of these learning labs is not somewhere in an isolated vacuum. So I've been looking for anchors, how we can anchor these conclusions in policy frameworks or references that already exist. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes. And of course, there are two that may be very familiar with, for most of you, the key competencies for lifelong learning, the European qualification framework, and from there, I will run you through quickly the skill sets that I would propose as a set with which the sector can work further. The next slide, please. Just as a reminder, the key competencies for lifelong learning that were adopted in 2019. There are 8 key competencies that are supposedly quite certainly needed for personal fulfillment, a healthy and sustainable lifestyle, employability, active citizenship, and social inclusion. I'm not going to read them all, but looking at these 15 collaborations, and you've already seen 2 very nice videos. I'll show you a few more videos a bit later. In these 15 labs, each lab has ticked at least 3 of these 8 competencies, often up to 5 or sometimes 6. Not so much multilingualism and literacy, but all the other 6 have been addressed in these collaborations in one way or another. Next slide, please. Now let's look at the European Qualifications Framework, which is a little bit more detailed. You may wonder why I'm showing the Estonian Qualifications Framework, but I'm just showing it because the Estonians have done a great job in visualizing it. But basically, it's the European Qualifications Framework, which has 8 levels. Level 6, 7, and 8 would be higher education. We had one learning lab, Lotto Zero, in Italy that was on an MA level, which would be level 7. Most of the learning labs were on primary school level, so level 1 or 2. Then there would be secondary education, but also occupational training. As you can see, this is the blue area, marked area. But you can also use it, of course, for informal or non-formal learning, because oftentimes we learn a lot in our home settings, taking care of a child, nursing a relative, working in a community project, going to a hub, developing your creative skills. And ultimately, as a utopia, so to speak, this qualification framework would enable us throughout our lifespan to enter and exit education in a very flexible way and also cash in our learnings that we may have learned in real life settings in order to take a next step in our qualification process. Now let's look at a set of competencies that we could propose for cooperations between hubs and education. The next slide, please. Well, this is the qualification framework still. It's interesting to see. You can see only level 1, 2, 3, 4, but it carries on with 5, 6, 7, 8, of course. But these levels are described in terms of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Formerly, we often said knowledge, skills, and competencies, but recently attitudes is more often used. And you can see that it's described in a very general level. Level 1, which is primary education, would say basic general knowledge, basic skills, work or study under direct supervision. And this evolves with each level that it goes down. And of course, these need to be translated into my concrete situation in my country, in my region, in my city, to my specific pedagogical approach as a school, to my neighborhood, to the communities, to the special needs of the kids I'm working with or students. So this is just a reference framework on a meta level that needs to be made concrete. Now, if we can have the next slide, please. Now, I've tried to make this concrete for creative partnerships. And I've made it not so concrete as to define it for each level of a qualification framework. So every school, be it a primary school or an MA program, would need to formulate these or reformulate these bullet points so that they match their specific level of education and also their specificities in terms of local context, discipline, and so further. But I think that in one way or another, when we speak about knowledge, all of these bullet points can be delivered in a creative partnership. For instance, I can read out the first one, the contextual perspective of processes of making. I think this is something in one way or another delivered in all partnerships. I'm not going to read out all of them. We will share the guidelines with all of you and you can read in depth. But I'd like to focus on bullet point number 3, creative processes and strategies. They have all been addressed in the labs. And just as an illustration, I'd like you to see the little video of FabLab Oberland. And please, the next slide in the video. Great, thank you. So I think it was quite obvious how creative processes and strategies were addressed in that specific school together with that specific Fab Lab. The next slide, please. I'd like to move on to skills. Well, it's the same here. Those skills are formulated on a level that needs specification for each particular situation. But all of them, I mean, to read again the first one, students in creative partnerships will acquire skills in initiating, generating, and exploring relevant ideas, propositions, and challenges. This has happened in all the labs, and of course, on different levels, but it was addressed in all of them. The second one, I would like to illustrate again with a little video, devising the appropriate strategies and or methodologies for a particular project. And for that, we can have a little impression of the Bulb Creative Hub in Belgium and their cooperation. Please, the next slide. Thank you. I think it's great. And although this video ends with the results and the fantastic, incredibly creative products and funny and products that the students have built or created, I think it's really about the process. And I'm quite sure you've realized that while watching. The process of going through it addresses so many issues and gives such a great learning experience that it is obvious why we can talk about this skill here in particular. Can I have the last slide, please? There we go to attitudes. There are a whole lot of attitudes that are addressed. such as self-reflection and critical engagement with your own practice and that of others. I think this is, again, something that, I mean, you've also seen in the previous video. But I'd like to focus on the attitude of empathy and team spirit, solidarity and sharing, by looking into a little video from Transfer Lab in Spain. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm at the end of my presentation, and what I'd like to stress again is that this set of competencies, structured in knowledge, skills, and attitudes, is hopefully contributing somehow to level the playing field between education and culture, because these competencies are delivered in a creative partnership. They are delivered by two partners that need to work on eyesight, so to speak, which means that from here, it is also required to maybe look at assessment. How do you assess what was learned in these partnerships, but also how the capacity is built to deliver these pedagogical concepts together from the beginning to the end. And I hope that the discussion that comes out of this project will somehow contribute to this further level playing field. And I keep it with that for the moment and look forward to talk further about it a little bit later.
Thank you very much, Lars, for this very illustrative presentation, and also for giving us a sneak peek into the guidelines that you have been working so hard on during these past months. On that note, just a note to our audience out there, the guidelines will be published soon, and we'll have it on our Flip website, and we'll make sure to publicize this, of course, through our channels. So we look forward to this. With this, now I would like to actually turn to a more external perspective and to Riina Vuorikari. Riina, you are working at the Joint Research Center at the European Commission, and we would like to ask, according to your research and findings, what opportunities do you see in cross-sectoral cooperation, and in particular in maker spaces getting involved with formal education and learning?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. If I can get my slides at the same time, that would be great. Thank you. So I work at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and our job is really, as a researchers, look around and look deeply into different opportunities that evidence shows that could be offered to European policymakers. I myself work in the area of education and skills. So our big sort of a report a couple of years ago was in looking into makerspaces and what makerspaces could offer for education and training in Europe in the future. And when I say in the future, we're talking about 2030. So this is a typical sort of a foresight futures exercise. We look what we have today and what could it bring for us tomorrow. And along the way, we're thinking, what are the policy actions we should be taking today in order for that to actually happen in 2030, in this case, or in the near future. So let's go ahead and look into this, this report. Next slide, please. So we looked at the literature that has emerged about maker spaces and their use for education and training. And there were three very sort of aspects that came out that we thought were very pertinent for education and training. It was something that education and training was lacking, but we could see that makerspaces could offer that. First of all, if you think of makerspace like the scenarios that we saw there, they look very different from a normal classroom school environment. One major thing is that idea of interdisciplinary. So we are making in normal classroom, we are teaching math, science, technologies, arts, and so on, design in different subject disciplines. But what happens in a makerspace is that those disciplines, they melt in and blend in a very natural way. So they are not taught separately anymore. And that's really something that we struggle to do in education and training. So this comes by design in makerspaces. Another important thing is that you take authentic real world problems. You're having actually some physical objects often in your hand, or you're designing an artifact, and you're going through this whole design process. So through doing that, you acquire new knowledge and you create meaning from these experiences that you're going through in the makerspace, in the making process. And the third topic that is really something particular for makerspaces is this flexible learning arrangements. In schools, we talk often about teacher-led activities, or we think about student-centered activities where they might be more collaboration between students and so on. But because of these very flexible and diverse arrangements in makerspaces, so you have people who take different roles. You have peers who teach peers. You have peers who mentor peers, and so on. So you have these different learning arrangements, and they are flexible. They take place in a very fluid ways, different roles, different times. So that's also something very particular. So we thought like these are three things that would be great if we could somehow, education and training could somehow take advantage. So let's go to the next slide. So we made scenarios, and we thought about, for example, formal education. And for us, it was important that this making activities would be defined in curriculum. So for that reason, I was very glad to see what Lars was elaborating before, is that we talk about actually learning outcomes, and we have explicit activities that can lead to those outcomes. And so we can actually have that process more set. And what is also very important is like when it's in the curriculum, we often get to this discussion about evaluation. So what do you evaluate in makerspaces? And it is not actually necessarily the product, but it's more the process, the design thinking, or the process from dismantling a device like they did and remaking it into something else. And you plan, you create a plan along the way, and so on. So if we in education start making these activities more explicit, if we start telling to the kids like, what did you learn in that step? Did you become aware that you were actually planning and designing and da-da-da? So that's a part which is very important when we talk about deep learning. Becoming aware of your own learning process, and then being able to actually transfer that learning into a new setting. Because of course, we do this for the future skills. We don't think that these kids are going to be forever in the makerspace, but we hope that they learn something useful for the rest of their life or job, being part of the society. So that transfer of knowledge, in order for it to happen, the learning needs to be made very explicit, also for the learner himself or herself. And then from there on, we have that better chances of transfer to a new context. Another important thing why we think that these activities should be outlined in curriculum is the equity issue. If they are not in the curriculum, it's not that all children get to participate in making activities. If they are extracurricular activities, there's always a group of people who go there, other ones are excluded. We have been talking a lot about equity in education, especially during pandemic. And this would be one way to make sure that all children, girls, boys, from a background whose parents can't afford after-school clubs, they also get to participate in these activities. And like was also already mentioned by previous speaker, the European key competencies for lifelong learning, this really makes them concrete. We talk about taking initiative, entrepreneurship. We talk about math, science, engineering skills. We talk about creativity, collaboration. Again, like the personal and social part, we heard also in videos how important that was. The choice that they can make themselves. What song am I learning? Those things, they are all also important parts of key competencies defined either in the digital competence framework, EntreComp, for entrepreneurship competence. We have also personal, social, and learning to learn competence framework, which is called LifeComp. So that's for that. Next slide, but we can skip that because that's more informal education. If we go one more slide, and this is my last slide, I will just say this, like while we promote the idea of bringing explicit learning activities and learning outcomes about maker spaces into education, and we think that it's a great idea to try to formulate those learning outcomes, there's a worry. There's a little worry that every time when we make these activities intentional for some learning goals, that we might also make them too rigid. In the literature, if you look at the education and maker spaces, there is this tension already. When maker spaces become too defined for learning, we lose something about that open-ended exploration, students discovering by themselves. So that's the little tension, and we call also that this tension could be explained by intentional learning, where we have the learning outcomes, and then on the other side we have incidental learning, and this incidental learning is typical to learning maker spaces. Incidental learning takes place without you having a goal in mind to learn now about the process of designing, but you start tinkering, you start playing with something, and you learn along the way. So that kind of informal, more informal flow of exploring, thinking, and sharing, which is clearly identified as incidental learning, that can get lost somehow. But knowing that there's a tension, I'm sure the education community can talk in a ways with the makerspace community to make it still happen in the best possible conditions. And that's where I'm going to end here, is to say that I think the guidelines are really great step to bring this cross-sectional collaboration to more fruitful activities, because makerspaces often feel like we have so much to offer for education, but we don't know how to package it, how to define it, and so on. So using these learning outcomes and being more explicit about the activities, where do they lead, will be sort of a bridging activity between the two sections or areas, and that creates the common languages for them. And I'm sure that will help then schools to take more advantage of makerspace activities, and also on the other hand, makerspace activities to package their products or activities for schools so that they become really meaningful for them. So that's where I end for the moment, and I look forward to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riina, for this more research-based perspective of yours, and thank you for being here with us today. I think I can safely say that we fully agree at the need of breaking up silos and, as you say, integrating creative activities really in outcomes and in the curricula at schools and also universities. And you have stressed the fact that maker spaces can actually play a significant role in this process. And this is where I would like to invite my colleague Vassilis Charalampidis, president of the European Creative Hubs Network, to the stage, the virtual stage. And Vassili, you are representing a network of creative hubs across Europe. So I would like to ask you from a hub's perspective, where is the added value for such cooperation between hubs and the educational institutions, and what are key elements to make this cooperation succeed and sustainable?
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. It's been really interesting listening to Lars. We've been also debating the last period of time. And Riina, it's amazing. You've covered most of my topics, to be honest. That's great. That's really amazing. I want, before beginning, to differentiate and just commenting on something that Riina presented. I mean, I always feel that we define maker spaces, which is a form of a space. And I would like to mostly talk about the creative communities and their intersection with education. That's really important, because I feel that just talking about the form of a space is not really helpful. But we can discuss also at a late stage about it. But talking about creative hubs, I mean, creative hubs are so different amongst them. They're different kinds in scale, form. They sometimes include maker spaces. Sometimes they don't have maker spaces, but they have creative people gathering and forming dynamic communities. One of the main things that we see in all creative hubs is that they are part and they're forming a core around an area. It could be a neighborhood, or it could be a university, because creative hubs identify other times themselves as part of a neighborhood, or are a formal part of a municipality, or of an institution itself, like a university. So we feel that the main role of creative hubs is that they gather creatives and creative communities. They form creative communities, and that's really, really important. You know, because creative people need each other, and they are defined by learning. You know, to be creative, part of the creative process is that you have to learn all the time. So people are used that they have to, it's part of the creative ethos, you know. I mean, you have to have a way to get to know new things, because creativity is not something that is set for them. It's something that every day, every single day, you have to explore. And creative communities want to bring in always new people, and of course, younger generations. So we always have identified that creative hubs and creative communities want to interact with all the education institutions, because that's where they usually find the younger generations. And they are the right people to bring in those transversal, as we name them, or creative skills. Of course, systematizing the way that we interact with education institutions is really, really exciting. But it's something that happens also organically every day. Creative hubs are part of communities, and communities are part of the education system. And we have to remember that sometimes we have to leave space and allow things to work also free form. And that's something that usually all school education and like curricula, as we name them, don't usually allow. And that's really important to realize. I mean, creativity, you know, and bringing in new people into creativity is so easy, because we always realize that young people are really excited to see how creative processes and creative things are. And that's really just enough sometimes, because excitement is one of the things that usually you don't have in formal education, in school. Experimentation is something that always happens within the context of creativity. And curiosity is something that is so vivid amongst young people. And you can use that as a leverage. And of course, is the love factor that we always forget in life and also in education, which is so important. I think that creative people can push the love factor, can make people love and explore things in a different way, not because they have to, but because they really want to. And that's what we are always trying to explore and bring together people and like highlight the love into things, the excitement, and of course, help them try new ways without even thinking, as also Riina previously said, which is really important. So I think that that's really great, and this program, these 15 case studies, have been a great opportunity to highlight how this function and try to bring a small system into this chaotic process. But I think that we should really explore a way to also leave it a bit free form, let's say, and not like struggle it with rules and how it should function. And that's really important, because that's where new things and new opportunities can come together. And that's what I want to stress out in this conversation today, because for me, that's what's really the ingredient that's missing right now in this kind of processes, in the learning process today. And that's something that is an everyday experience into a creative hub. And that's what we want to convey into all these kind of experiments. And I think it has been great. I see that, Lars, you have a comment on this one. So yeah, come on, step in.
No, I not so much a comment, but it's so great to hear that, and I just can't hold myself to react to both Riina and you, Vassilis, because I think that a few things are coming together here. And I made one note what you just said, that Vassilis, that we are trying to bring a system into a chaotic process, and I'm not so sure if we really try to do that. I'd rather say we are trying to recognize a chaotic process as a system. Because, what was said yesterday in the opening presentations, I don't know who said it, but there was talk about disruptive innovation, and that we need to be more playful, and that the combination of creativity and frontier research is so important. And I think that relates somehow to, Vassili, what you said about creative communities and how they function. That I fully agree to that creative people, artists, but also, humans, we are all creative. We need one another, and we need the exchange, and creative communities will always kind of try to make spaces, mental or physical spaces, in which they can create bonds and challenge one another and trust one another. And I think that from that ethos, I've seen that in the labs, that it was the hubs that stepped towards the schools saying, hey, we have an idea, shall we try this? And that then most of the time, there was a period of convincing the school that chaos is okay, that there's a value in it. If there was not a time to convince the schools, they already knew someone in the school. There was a trust because, I don't know, someone from the hub was in a parent organization or so. But the but the dynamics is from the creative community to the education community. And I feel that we kind of take it as a barrier that the education community is kind of rigid, they have their curriculum and they are not flexible because they have a ministry, and we have to respect that. And here comes the creative community, and they, the world is our playground, there are no limits, we can do whatever we want, and come on, join us. And of course they don't join, and so we need a system. We need to adapt to them because otherwise they don't join us. And I'm not so sure how to bridge that. And I'm not saying that the set of competencies or so will solve the problem. But I'm wondering about something that Riina has brought in, that the division between incidental and intentional, and your worry, Riina, which is probably Vassilis' worry also, that making it too rigid can kind of suffocate or kind of pour out the child with the bathwater, so to speak. And I'm wondering, in this conversation, a thought comes up whether we could use the framework the other way around. Normally, we have the European qualification framework, or I'm proposing now a set of learning outcomes that hubs and schools can use to formulate their own ones, as a reference system that kind of feeds us, which would be the rigid way. But maybe we can use it the other way around, and just experiment, go, and see what the process delivers us. We still focus on the process, but afterwards we have a kind of like the gold in the basement of a bank. We go and check what the value is of what we've just done afterwards. I'm not so sure how to integrate that in a curriculum, but somehow that way we would take the experiment and the chaos serious, and still kind of say, well, we have a backup that kind of allows us to double check what the value is really.
Then I think that could also work in a very, very fine way. And I think there you would have to be sure that you have that reflective session afterwards, where you go back with the makers through the process, what they did, make it sort of visible for them, like, listen, at that step, you remember you struggled and then you walked over to Joe and you talked to him and he helped you. What happened there? Tell me, let's go through that. And then you say, like, look, it was very important that you went and asked for help, and there you can say, like, okay, bring out these things, like the little gold nuggets, these are the learning moments. And it doesn't matter which way you go, in a way, if you're conscious to make sure that at the end you do that process. Because if you just walk out of the lab and they have like a little device at hand and they go home and then the mom's like, what did you do? And the kid's like, oh, we just kind of like made this thing. And they don't reflect more on what happened. So that's, for me, is really important. And exactly like you said, Vassilis, you did put your finger on that tension that I talked about. And one thing is, like, these learning outcomes in curriculum itself should not be too fine detailed. They should be abstract enough that you can use makerspace, you can use a creative hub, you can use a theater play, to create a theater play, or any other, processes that are part of this creative sort of a thinking process, critical thinking. You make, 5 options and you choose one and you play that further. So that they, makerspace is just one way to explore and learn and, get into that goal of learning or exercising creativity and making that relevant for kids and visible for kids, so that they know that it's okay and it's part of the things that we do in schools nowadays. It's not that boring discipline, set up anymore, squared. So yeah, that was my thought when I was also listening to Vassilis and you. Thanks.
Thank you, Riina. I would just, it's very nice that you've kickstarted the conversation here, and we have another, I think, 3 to 4 minutes. It's actually nice. I see we have a question on the chat that I might just direct to the 3 of you. Anita de Bere is asking, how can we create a change in curricula to focus on STEAM, and in particular on the process of creativity and learning, as those cannot be easily measured? I'm not sure. Riina, you would like to step in?
Yeah, like I would like you to share my slides then afterwards with everybody. At the last page, we have I have a link to another report, which is exactly about creativity and how that has been taught in schools. We looked at around the world, different curriculum, and in Australia, Canada, you have really interesting examples about that being part of curriculum and how the learning outcomes have been outlined. So there are good cases already around for us to look at. And of course, then how do you make that change happen at the local level? Once you know what you want, of course, that is the political change and action that we are all after here. So maybe others have also some good ideas. I'll leave the floor for them. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi, Anita. Thanks for the question. I'm not so sure I want to go into STEAM, because it's somehow, for me, the STEAM is like a subject that steamrolls across all the discussions at the moment. And of course, it's important to kind of break through silos, and STEAM is a nice example to do that. But what about all the other disciplines? I think in terms of meaning making and in the light of artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution and so on, it's almost, for me, as important to look at humanities and social sciences and how the arts collaborate with them and how they come in. But to get back to your real question about how creativity can be measured, I'm quite inspired by what higher arts education has done with, for instance, the framework for creative and performing disciplines, in which they have defined 7 dimensions of the creative process before they've looked into knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which they've defined as well in that, as Riina said, very abstract way, so that basically everything can go under it. But then from there, at the moment, they are developing in the next 2 years in a tuning project, assessment criteria, assessment matrices, which range from classical assessments to very wild forms of assessment, I would say, that are more in tune with creative processes, and that include external stakeholders like employers, community representatives, and so on, to be part of a creative process and reflect on it in a conversation afterwards. And I think through these maybe complex but dialogue-based approaches, creativity can be measured in a very not objective, rather intersubjective, but comparable way. And I think we, in that way, we take creativity serious and we take clear criteria serious.
Thank you, Lars. Yes, exactly. I wanted to give the word to you, Vassilis.
Thank you. What I wanted to say is, for us humans, learning is a primal need, and we keep forgetting that. I mean, we see the world and it feels so chaotic, and we do not perceive things around us. But what defines us as humans is that we want to bring some order and some understanding into it. And education, I think, over the years has been forgetting that. I think we need those open platforms, those experimentation platforms, that we bring us closer to this primal need of understanding. And that's what is important to define and understand, because we want to figure it out. We want to figure out the things around us. And that's the important bit that we have to take away today, I think, in my understanding, at least.
Thank you. I think I see that as well Lars, as well Riina agree with this last statement, and I would actually use this as an opportunity to wrap up the session. We are perfectly in time, and it was really nice to have you all three here today to combine your perspectives on the topic. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for participating today. We will be back in just a few moments, but we will stick to the topic of creative skills in general with my colleague Pierre Hausemer, who will lead a panel discussion on CCSI skills, needs and gaps, flip for the better. Thank you very much.